Joining us on the line is my friend Gary Sinise. Of course, you know him from Forrest Gump, among a wide variety of other works. He has a brand new album out. When I say he, I really mean it's an album that he created on behalf of his son, Mac, who's an amazing person. Mac passed away just a little bit earlier this year. And this album is an amazing accomplishment. First of all, it's Mac's music. It's a vinyl recording called Mac Sinise Resurrection and Revival. It's a two-part vinyl recording. It really is tremendous. Gary, thanks so much for joining the show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Ben.
So for those who don't know Mac's story, why don't you tell Mac's story and how about how you came about doing this project?
Well, yes, thanks for giving me the time. So in 2018, my wife had been diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer, and we were going through, she had surgery, and then she had her first chemo treatment in, I think it was probably about August of 2018. And it really rocked her. I mean, I had to take her to the emergency room. It was so bad that we had to check her in to the hospital. And that first treatment really knocked her socks off. So I got her home, and we were sitting in our backyard, and we were discussing with another person what we were going to do with the next treatment, how we were going to get through it, because the first one was so difficult. And earlier that day, our son had been having a lot of pain in his tailbone for a couple of years. And he had seen some doctors. They thought it was a bruised tailbone from a bicycle accident where he slammed on the brakes too hard and jammed his tailbone into the seat. They thought maybe that it was related to that. There was an X-ray that was done, really didn't show anything. But he was having so much trouble, and he was just terribly uncomfortable, couldn't even sleep. And so Moira my wife had several spine surgeries, and I called her spinal doctor and said, "Can you see Mac and just see if, what's going on?" And so I'm sitting there with Moira in the backyard, and we're discussing her next chemo treatment. And I get a call from the surgeon who sent Mac to the CT scanner. And he called me and he said, "Mac has a tumor." And the tumor was wrapped around his sacrum. It was about the size of an orange. And I immediately jumped in the car and went down to meet Mac. The doctor had him in the CT scanner, and then he sent him to the MRI machine. And I went to meet Mac at the MRI, and then went back to the doctor's office, and he showed us the tumor. And it was literally, Ben, I mean, it was this big, wrapped around his sacrum. And the doctor suspected it was a tumor called chordoma. It's a very, very rare cancer. Maybe 300 people in the U.S. per year are diagnosed with chordoma. Quite often, 70% of the time, they can remove the tumor off the spine and cure it. It's gone. They get everything, and it's out, and it's gone. But 30% of the time, it comes back, and that's what happened to us in May of 2019. We found out that Mac's cancer had come back. So that began a chemo and radiation fight there as the cancer started to spread. Several surgeries to remove more tumors off the spine, several radiation treatments, several drugs to try to fight it, because there are no drugs developed for chordoma. So they just throw whatever they can find, and they throw it at it. Over the course of the next 4 years, he would try 25 different drugs. He was a drummer, Ben, an excellent, excellent drummer. He played with my band sometimes, and he went to USC Music School, Thornton School of Music, where he went from just simply drumming to composing and songwriting and conducting, and he wanted to write music for film and all of that. When the cancer really got difficult for him, he was paralyzed from the chest down. He couldn't play drums anymore. Had to really put music away because he was fighting cancer. But then last year, probably February of 2023 last year, he said to me, "Dad, there's a piece of music that I wrote in college that I never finished, and I think I'd like to try to finish it." And Mac hadn't been doing any music for quite a while because he'd been fighting cancer. And got him together with some of my band members. They started helping flesh it out. It's a piece called Arctic Circles. Um, they went into the studio summer of July of 2023 and recorded this amazing piece of music with an orchestra. I had never heard any of it, Ben. He was working on it with a buddy of his from college, Oliver Schnee, and they were kind of doing it secretly last year. He was in a hospital bed. We had round the clock nursing care for him. But in the meantime, he was trying to flesh out this new piece of music. And then on July 17th last year, 2023, we went in the studio and I heard this piece of music for the first time and was floored. There's a Mac Sinise YouTube. There's a video of Arctic Circles on that YouTube channel. And you can see I'm in the video just like weeping and sobbing because it was so amazingly beautiful. And that began a journey for Mac where he wanted to create an entire album of music. So that's where Resurrection and Revival came from. He finished the album just weeks before he died. He died January 5th of this year. And just weeks before he died, he completed the music. All the music was recorded. It went to press and the vinyl was being pressed. Unfortunately, he never got to see the vinyl completed, but he heard all the music. And then after he died, Ben, I just started going through his files and I found all this additional music that he had written that I had never heard. A lot of it I'd never heard. Some of it I had because he wrote it for the Gary Sinise Foundation to use in our videos. But most of it I hadn't heard before. He just wrote it and tucked it away. And so I thought, I'm not going to let this music just sit on his laptop. So I went to work on Resurrection and Revival Part 2. And that was just released on the Gary Sinise Foundation website last week. It's a double album. There's so much music on it. It's amazing. And we're selling it. And as Mac wanted, all the proceeds from the first record went to the Gary Sinise Foundation. And with the second record, we're doing the same thing for Mac. All the proceeds will go to help the Gary Sinise Foundation. He worked for the foundation starting in 2017, but he had to step away for the cancer fight.
Obviously, he's an amazingly talented person, and the music is just wonderful. The double vinyl album is 17 original compositions, 2 covers, 19 total tracks, and it really is an amazing accomplishment, both by him and then obviously by you and the team that put this together. Because what did you have to work with? You say that you found new tunes by him. In what sort of state did you find these tunes?
Well, let me start with the music that I asked him to write for the Gary Sinise Foundation. So Mac was very, very creative, very talented. But, you know, he's working for a nonprofit, so we can't hire an orchestra to go in and record all the music for this documentary. So Mac would do it on his computer with all his samples and all his patches, you know, the cellos and the strings and the horns and the drums and everything like that. He created it all on his computer and wrote all this music for, there's a documentary about my sort of journey with all the military support and everything. And it kind of tracks the history of all that going back to the 80s. And the documentary is called Always Do a Little More. And so Mac wrote about 75% of the music for that on his computer. And he's got all the strings, he's got everything. It sounds like an orchestra, but it's not. It's all done on samples. So I found all that music again and some additional music that he wrote for the foundation that I'd never heard because it was never used. But beautiful, beautiful stuff, all done on the computer. The horns, everything. I mean, it sounds like an orchestra playing it, but it's Mac doing it on his computer. So we took all that music, and I called up his buddy who worked with him on the first record. His name's Oliver Schnee. He was a composer pal from USC Music School. They were buddies. They teamed up on Resurrection and Revival Part 1, and Oliver kind of took all this music for Part 2, transposed it, got it off the computer, transposed it, wrote it out so that we could have it played by a live orchestra. And last summer, in July and August, we went into the studio and recorded all this orchestral music that Mac wrote. He wanted to write for film. That's what he really wanted to do, I think. He loved drumming and everything, but he wasn't satisfied to just be a drummer. He wanted to be a film composer. He loved John Williams and James Newton Howard and James Horner. And I mean, just scores of great film composers that he loved, Hans Zimmer and all that. And, that's what he wanted to do. So he was writing for the foundation. I don't think he ever envisioned that music coming to life with a live orchestra, but we brought it to life last summer with a live orchestra. And then there were all this other music going all the way back to his USC days, Ben. I mean, there were recordings that he made at USC where he's drumming, and he's drumming on songs that he was writing for class. I mean, they had to write songs. They were in, music theory class, composition class, all that stuff. And their assignments were to go off and make music. And they have some great studios at USC and all that. So I found all these recordings that I had never heard before because he wrote them, when he was a sophomore and a junior in college, and then just tucked the music away. So I found it, and I started listening to it, and I was just knocked out by what I was finding. Then I found charts that he had written for big band jazz tunes. I mean, Mac had never been like a big jazzer, but all of a sudden I find this big band jazz tune. I gave it to my piano player. I said, play this for me. And so he got the band, he did a little arrangement, got the band to play it, and it's just a swinging great tune. It's called Sweep Sweepin', and it's on Mac Sinise YouTube. There's a video of that, as well as videos of some of the other things. But 19 compositions later, as you said, there are two covers. One is Nature Boy. Remember that Nat King Cole classic, Nature Boy? Mac does a version of that where he does all the instruments, plays all the instruments, and sings, and did his own arrangement and all of that. And then there's one other cover of the old American classic, Home on the Range. So on the first record, Mac plays harmonica. His mom suggested he get a harmonica because he couldn't play drums anymore. His right hand was paralyzed. He could move his arm up and down, but the fingers he couldn't move on his right hand. On his left arm, there was a tumor up here in the shoulder, so it fractured his shoulder. So he couldn't lift his arm up, but he had the fingers on his left hand. So he had one arm over here and fingers over here. So he could, his mom suggested he get a harmonica and sit in the hospital bed and play the harmonica. So he taught himself harmonica. So on the first record, he plays Amazing Grace on harmonica. He plays Shenandoah. There's an amazing video, Ben, of Mac playing Shenandoah with this orchestra. And it's really a knockout. He plays the Star Spangled Banner on harmonica. He plays another one called Tura Lura Lura. And that was a song that his mother used to sing to him when he was little. And she also sang one called Red River Valley. Remember that one? And so Mac plays harmonica on Red River Valley and Tura Lura Lura and all these songs. Well, there was one recording for Home on the Range that was not used on the first record. And Oliver had that recording. Oliver had recorded it. So I said, well, let's complete the arrangement. Mac and Oliver had worked on an arrangement. It just didn't make the first record. So I said, well, we're going to put it on the second record. So that's the other cover, Home on the Range and Nature Boy. And then all the rest, 17 compositions, all original, from jazz to orchestral to rock. I mean, it's all over the map. It's really it's a beautiful, fun record with each side having its own unique kind of characteristic.
Folks, it's a wonderful piece of work. Obviously, it's a tremendous tribute to Mac, and all the proceeds of the record sales go to the Gary Sinise Foundation, which honors veterans and first responders and their families and people in need. They're doing amazing work over at the Gary Sinise Foundation, have been doing for years. Gary, thanks for the album, and I'm excited that so many people are going to be able to hear Mac's music.
Thanks, Ben. The first record, Resurrection and Revival, that's on digital, so you can download it. You can order the vinyl at GarySiniseFoundation.org. The digital for Resurrection and Revival Part 2 will be out just after the first of the year.
Amazing. So folks, go check it out. Gary, thanks so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
I sure appreciate it, Ben. Have a safe trip.
Are you tired of the lies and the twist of the mainstream media talking points? Yeah, me too. Join me in my newest series, Fact, where I dismantle and bring truth to this tiring mainstream agenda.